We're going to turn to our next section now, which is the last section before we close. So this will be Professor Sean Dinneen, and he's going to talk to us today about COVID-19, the pandemic, PPI, and how PPI is more important now than ever. So over to you.
Thanks, Patrick, and it's great to be just getting this opportunity to come together as a PPI community here in Ireland, and I know we have colleagues connected in from overseas, and it's been a really, really rich and interesting morning. I'm going to just reflect on maybe what we've heard, take some sound bites and some learnings that I've got from the various presentations. I'm of course going to thank people for making this happen, and then I'm going to reflect on the pandemic that we're all living through at the moment. And interestingly, I think I'm correct in saying that it hasn't been mentioned up to now, which is perhaps one reason that the morning has been so positive. So my name is Sean Dinneen. I'm a clinician and an academic here in Galway, and I have the privilege of being part of the PPI Ignite family, which is an evolving network of universities and academics and people in universities around Ireland who are coming together to try to provide leadership in the area of public and patient involvement, advocating for it in our universities and in our communities, fostering partnerships like those that we've just heard this morning, and you know, trying to make sure that Ireland is playing its part in contributing to and indeed benefiting from this what is still, I think, this new approach to doing health and social care research. So if I could have my first slide, please, Martha. So this is the title I was given, and you know, none of us, certainly myself, none of us knew anything about this condition as recently, probably, as January, but we have all, in a very short period of time, become experts on COVID-19 and the impact that it's had on our health systems around the world and on our societies. So just before I reflect on PPI in the COVID era, my next slide will be familiar to you because it's the program for today. I want to just very briefly comment on what have been really what has been an outstanding set of presentations. Fiona Keogh kicked off the morning. You know, attention to detail was one thing that I noted from her presentation on PPI in policy making. The attention to detail was evident in her presentation, and the detail that she and her colleagues went to in accessing the patient voice and the lived experience, respect and balancing all expertise, a phrase that Fiona used. But mostly what I took from her presentation was this idea that PPI, to do it well, takes time. And I would say that that's been a recurring theme throughout the morning. The Youth as Researchers program, developed by Dr. Danielle Kennan and her colleagues in UNESCO. Again, a wonderful presentation, including Damien and Emma. I got a sense of real enthusiasm, almost, you know, good fun. And interestingly, you know, in terms of the learning for me, a lot more positive than negative messages about social media among teenagers. So really well done to Danielle for facilitating it, and especially well done to Damien and Emma for outstanding presentations. Then we heard this very poignant story from Anne Lennon Bird about her journey through this condition, Huntington's disease, her involvement with her own family, her husband Donal, following that grey line that she described so beautifully, but not from the standpoint of the messages coming at the end of the grey line. But this relationship that she and her colleagues in the charity have built with a researcher, again, that sense of time being needed to develop that working relationship between the PPI advocates and the clinicians, researchers. We then heard the first of a set of 3 partnership presentations. The first from Dr. Siobhan Kelleher and Kathleen King. Again, this sense of taking time, it takes time and effort, being open and honest partners. And a real important message, I think, the patient contribution being more than the lived experience. I think that Kathleen really evoked that very strongly in her own account of her involvement with the condition and with the Endometriosis Society of Ireland. And then we just heard, of course, from 2 of our Community Engaged Scholars Programme participants. I know there was a chat question about the CESP, as we call it. It's a program that's been delivered at the Medical University of South Carolina in the US for about 10 years now. It's about developing community and academic partnerships, spending a lot of time on developing the partnership before ever doing any research. So we have, again, been fortunate through funding from the HRB to pilot this Community Engaged Scholars Programme in Ireland. And it's really nice to hear and to witness the fruits of that labour with, in particular, John and Orla presenting preliminary data from their own work. But I think, Denise and Chris's presentation, just get started, was the comment for those who might want to be embracing PPI in their work. And then from John and Orla's presentation, that back and forth between, it's not my project, it's our project. So next slide, please, is just introducing you, those of you not familiar with our PPI Ignite network, a network of 5, soon to be 7 universities in Ireland who are currently delivering a capacity building program around our universities, advocating for supporting where it's happening already and training where it's not happening, training people in how to envisage and deliver high quality public and patient involvement in research. So what are the lessons from today then for our current health crisis, which is COVID-19? I have been reflecting on an image of the pandemic in Ireland. I chose this one. You could choose curves, but they're less personal, I find. We are flattening the curve, thankfully, but I find this image quite strong. For those of you not familiar with the people on the slide, on your right, Dr. Tony Houlihan is a specialist in public health medicine who leads our public health emergency team and gives us daily updates on the state of play with regard to the number of cases, the number of fatalities, or ICU occupancy, and so on. He's taught us things that we thought we'd never know around R0 and rates of change and so on. But interestingly, on your left is a signer, an Irish Sign Language signer, who every evening during these updates from the Department of Health and from the CMO translates in Irish Sign Language the messages that are coming. I think it reflects that inclusion message that we need to keep in mind as we tackle this virus and this pandemic. So I was also reminded, and Tony Houlihan and all of the people involved in leading this response to the pandemic highlight how, although healthcare professionals tend to get the the kudos and get the accolades around being in the front line. It really is the community that is in the front line. It's the public who have managed to impact on the virus, and so they also serve who only stand and wait is the line that comes to mind. So if my next slide, then reflecting on the need to tackle this pandemic, the HRB and other funders supported by the Government of Ireland have come up with this COVID-19 Rapid Response Research and Innovation funding opportunity with a total of 26 projects funded to date. And there is, of course, a need for this around the world, and Ireland is playing its part. One aspect of the rapid response and this call for research and innovation has been the development of a national research ethics committee. The application form for the NREC is shown here. And my take on PPI in health and social care research is that if we are successful in our Ignite network, and if we're successful in Ireland in embedding high quality public and patient involvement in our research process, then we won't need an Ignite office anymore. We will have it embedded. Research, and I would compare it to research ethics. We have a research ethics requirement to do any research. You have to think about the ethical implications. Wouldn't it be wonderful if at some point in the future, there was an obligation, or there was a requirement to have PPI also included alongside research ethics. So next slide highlights some of the challenges involved in delivering PPI in the COVID-19 era, around the need for centralized decision-making, rapid response, as we've just seen in the call document, the clinical perspective, in particular ICU and very sick patients dominating, but of course a need for studying the impact of the pandemic on society at large. This challenge that we've heard of today, PPI taking time to build these personal relationships, can be quite difficult when the need is great for a rapid response. Next slide. But importantly, and the message we'd like to emphasize is that we think it's PPI is more important than ever. The solutions that we come up with should be shaped by those who will be most impacted, including everyone in society, the marginalized, the vulnerable. We need public trust in the solutions that come from the research. We need the lived experience of patients and people who have experienced the infection, but also lived experience of others, because we will very likely have a non-COVID surge as patients return or get the confidence to return to our hospitals and our general practice surgeries. And this phrase that, doing PPI well helps the researchers and helps everybody identify these nuggets of gold in the research program. Next slide. There are some examples of existing PPI advisory panels, like this one in Perth in Western Australia has been adapted to the COVID-19 pandemic, and offering themselves as an advisory group to researchers. The individuals on this advisory panel may not have personal experience of COVID-19, but they do have personal experience of living with conditions. And next slide. And so we have a public advisory panel. Some of the members are participating today. And again, I think that this is a resource that we and our research community should be aware of and should be able to tap into and use the expertise that that comes with it. And my final slide is quoting from one of our Primary Care Clinical Trial Network Ireland PPI advisory panel members, Dennis Mokler. those of you who were at our, I think it was the second or third national conference, remember Dennis performing this ballad, which included this line, "The patient is part of the answer, don't leave us out in the cold." So just to finish and acknowledge Edel Murphy and Martha Killalay from PPI Ignite at NUI Galway, the Primary Care Clinical Trials Network Ireland group, Andrew, Patrick and Breda Kelleher, Eileen Walsh from the College of Medicine in NUI Galway, a learning technologist who's enabled us to use Collaborate, Blackboard Collaborate for this conference. Our three PPI representatives on our conference organising committee, Casey Donaghy, Patrick Towers and Wendy Costello. I'd like to thank all of the conference contributors and session chairs. And finally, the HRB and IRC for funding our PPI Ignite network and for supporting PPI in Ireland. So unless there are pressing questions, I'm going to hand over to Martha to finish up.
Thanks very much, Sean. I would just like to reiterate what Sean said and have a massive thank you to all of the presenters here today, everyone who has joined us. So usually the best part of our conference is the networking, but I feel the interaction that we've had in the chat today has just been fantastic. I would like to give a special thank you to the organising committee and Eileen Walsh, who is a learning technologist in NUI Galway. Without Eileen's patience, knowledge and ability to keep us calm, this conference wouldn't have went ahead today. Thank you very much, Eileen, for all your technical support. I have just put in an evaluation form into the chat. This form will also be emailed to all attendees. We would really appreciate your feedback on conference today. Each year when we go to create the new conference, we do reflect on the feedback from previous years, so we would really like to hear your feedback. Earlier today, you saw the trailer for a PPI documentary, The Patient Effect. PPI Ignite and the HRB Primary Care Clinical Trials Network were involved in the creation of this documentary, which was funded from the HRB. Before COVID hit, we have been travelling all over Ireland to show this documentary, which tells the story of PPI to different researchers and community groups. We're going to move forward with this and next week host our first virtual screening of the documentary. This, like the conference, is a first for us and is a daunting experience, but we are going to move forward. As Sean has just said, PPI is important now more than ever. There is information in the evaluation form on how to get involved in the virtual screening next week. So for now, I would like to say a big thank you, goodbye, and a massive sigh of relief on behalf of all of the organising committee. Thank you very much for joining us today.